Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 12 years, and in that time he thought he had heard every possible answer a contestant could give. He had heard hilarious answers, shocking answers, occasionally brilliant answers, and plenty of answers that made absolutely no sense at all. But on a humid afternoon in June 2024, a 19-year-old college student named Marcus Thompson was about to give an answer in the final seconds of Fast Money that would stop Steve Harvey completely in his tracks, silence an entire studio audience, and create a moment so powerful that it would spark a national conversation about second chances, the justice system, and what it really means to break a cycle. What started as a standard Fast Money round would become a cultural moment that nobody in that studio would ever forget. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these powerful moments that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit. The Thompson family stood on the Family Feud stage with an energy that was both nervous and electric. There was Marcus Thompson, 19 years old, and a freshman at Howard University on a full academic scholarship. Beside him stood his grandmother, Dorothy Thompson, age 67, who had raised Marcus from the time he was 6 years old. His aunt Regina, age 45, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital, stood next to his two cousins, Jamal, who was 23 and in the military, and Keisha, who was 21 and studying to be a social worker. They were competing against the Williams family from Atlanta, and the game had been close, competitive, and filled with the kind of wholesome family energy that made Family Feud such a beloved show. But there was something about Marcus that caught people's attention. He carried himself with a maturity that seemed beyond his 19 years. When he smiled, which he did often, there was a depth behind his eyes that suggested he had seen more of life than most teenagers. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, but the way he kept adjusting his collar suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable in dress clothes, like he was still getting used to presenting himself in formal spaces. Dorothy Thompson, Marcus's grandmother, was a small woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and hands that showed decades of hard work. She kept one hand on Marcus's shoulder throughout most of the game, a gesture of both support and pride. Every time he gave an answer, correct or incorrect, she would squeeze his shoulder and smile at him like he had just done something miraculous. And in a way, maybe he had. But the audience didn't know that story yet. The game had progressed with both families playing well and having fun. Steve Harvey was in his element, joking with both families, doing his signature walk, a ways when someone gave an unexpected answer, making everyone comfortable. He had a special warmth when he interacted with Marcus, perhaps sensing something in the young man that reminded him of his own journey from difficult circumstances to success. The Thompson family had won the main game by a narrow margin, and now they were in Fast Money. Jamal, Marcus's older cousin, had gone first and scored a respectable 147 points. That meant Marcus needed 53 points to win the $20,000. It was definitely achievable, but it wasn't guaranteed. The pressure was on, and Marcus could feel the weight of his family's hopes resting on his shoulders. Steve walked over to Marcus with his characteristic confidence, microphone in hand, ready to guide him through Fast Money. "All right, young man, your cousin Jamal did his thing. He got us 147 points. You need 53 to bring home that $20,000. You ready for this?" Marcus took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. I'm ready." "I like that confidence," Steve said, then paused. "Marcus, before we start, I gotta ask you something. Your grandmother told me backstage that you're at Howard University on a full scholarship. That's impressive, young man. What are you studying?" Marcus's face lit up. "Criminal justice, Mr. Harvey. I want to be a lawyer, specifically a criminal defense attorney." "Criminal defense?" Steve raised his eyebrows. "That's a tough field. What made you want to go into that?" Marcus glanced back at his grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "I want to help people who the system has given up on, Mr. Harvey. I want to make sure everyone gets a fair chance, no matter where they come from or what they've done." There was something in the way he said it, a conviction that went deeper than typical teenage idealism. Steve sensed it but didn't push. "That's beautiful, man. We need more people like you. All right, let's play Fast Money. 20 seconds on the clock. Here we go." The familiar timer appeared on the screen, and Steve launched into the questions. Name something you might find in a teenager's bedroom. Clothes on the floor. Marcus answered without hesitation. Name a reason you might be late for work. Traffic. Name something people do at a gym. Lift weights. Name a place where you have to be quiet. Library. Steve paused before the fifth and final question. This was it, the last answer that would determine whether the Thompson family won the 20,000 or went home with much less. The studio audience held their breath. Dorothy Thompson had her hands clasped together in prayer. Marcus stood at the podium, focused and ready. Name something, Steve read from his card, that people deserve a second chance at. It was an open-ended question, the kind that could have dozens of acceptable answers. Love, career, friendship, education, sports, anything that fit the theme of getting another opportunity. Marcus had maybe 3 seconds to think before he needed to answer to keep the momentum going. Most contestants in this position would go for the safest, most obvious answer, but Marcus didn't give the expected answer. Instead, he looked directly at Steve Harvey and said 4 words that changed the entire atmosphere in the studio. Life after prison. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Steve Harvey, this man who always had a comeback, who never missed a beat, who could riff on any answer no matter how strange, just stood there frozen. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He stared at Marcus with an expression that was equal parts shock, confusion, and dawning understanding. The audience didn't react at first. They were waiting for Steve's reaction, waiting for the laugh or the joke or the commentary that always came. But Steve wasn't moving, he wasn't speaking. He was just standing there, looking at this 19-year-old kid who had just said something that clearly meant more than a simple game show answer. Marcus stood his ground, not backing down from his answer, not apologizing for it. His jaw was set, his eyes were clear, and he was looking at Steve with a mixture of defiance and hope, like he was daring Steve to judge him while simultaneously praying he wouldn't. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds, Steve found his voice. Marcus, he said slowly, carefully, did you just say life after prison? Yes, sir, Marcus replied, his voice steady. I said life after prison. Steve nodded slowly, still processing. That's a very specific answer, young man. That's not something most 19-year-olds would think of. Is there a reason that's the first thing that came to your mind? The studio was still completely silent. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Everyone sensed that something significant was happening, that this had gone beyond a game show moment into something real and raw. Marcus looked back at his grandmother again. Dorothy had tears in her eyes, but she was nodding, giving him permission to share what they had been carrying as a family. Marcus turned back to Steve and made a decision to tell his truth. Mr. Harvey, I need to tell you something. I need to tell everyone something. His voice was shaking now, but he pushed forward. When I was 6 years old, my father was sentenced to 25 years in prison for armed robbery. He made terrible choices because he was caught up in drugs and desperation. He hurt people. What he did was wrong, and he owned that. He pleaded guilty. He didn't make excuses. The audience was completely transfixed. Steve Harvey's expression had shifted from confusion to deep attention. He was no longer a game show host. He was just a man listening to another man's story. Marcus continued, his words gaining strength. My mother couldn't handle it. She fell apart after he was sentenced. Child Protective Services took me away from her and placed me with my grandmother. Grandma Dorothy right there. She raised me from 6 years old. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. She made sure I stayed in school, stayed out of trouble, stayed focused on a future that didn't look like my father's past. Dorothy was crying openly now, as were several audience members. Steve's eyes were glistening. For 13 years. Marcus said, I visited my father in prison every single month that they would let me. I watched him transform himself. He got his GED in prison. He took every rehabilitation class they offered. He learned a trade. He stayed out of trouble. He became a mentor to younger inmates, trying to keep them from making the same mistakes he did. He did everything right, Mr. Harvey. Everything. Marcus's voice cracked, but he kept going. My father was released 3 months ago after serving his full sentence. 25 years, Mr. Harvey. He left prison when he was 51 years old, having missed my entire childhood, having missed his own life. And you know what he came home to? Nothing. No job because nobody wants to hire a convicted felon. No place to live because landlords won't rent to people with records. No bank account because banks denied him. He did everything right for 13 years, but society decided his punishment wasn't over just because he left prison. The studio was dead silent except for the sound of people crying. Steve Harvey had tears running down his face. This was so far beyond anything anyone had expected from a fast money answer. My father, Marcus said, his voice breaking completely now, is sleeping on my grandmother's couch in her one-bedroom apartment. This man who rebuilt himself, who did his time, who wants nothing more than to contribute to society and be a father to me finally, he can't even get an interview for a job that pays minimum wage. That's why I said life after prison, Mr. Harvey, because my father deserves a second chance at life. He paid his debt, he served his time, he transformed himself, but the system won't let him have a life after prison, and there are millions of people just like him. Marcus wiped his eyes roughly. I'm going to Howard to study criminal justice because I want to change that system. I want to help people like my father get real second chances. I want to fight for people that society has written off. Because my father isn't a monster. He's a man who made terrible mistakes when he was young and desperate, and he's spent more than half his life paying for those mistakes. At some point, punishment has to end and redemption has to begin. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? The teenager looked directly into the camera, speaking to millions of viewers who would eventually see this. If you're watching this and you're someone who did time and changed your life, I see you. You matter. You deserve a real second chance, and I'm going to spend my life fighting to make sure you get one. Steve Harvey stood there with tears streaming down his face, making no effort to wipe them away. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Marcus, I need you to understand something. In all my years doing this show, I have never, and I mean never, heard an answer like that. You just used a game show platform to speak truth that most people don't want to hear. You took your 60 seconds in fast money, and you used it to advocate for your father and for millions of people who society has forgotten about. He turned to the audience. Y'all see what just happened here. This young man didn't give a safe answer. He didn't say love, or career, or something generic. He spoke his truth, knowing it might cost him, knowing people might judge him, knowing his family's private pain would become public. But he did it anyway because he believes in something bigger than himself. Steve turned back to Marcus. Your father, is he watching this? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. He's at my grandmother's apartment watching with my mother. She got clean 4 years ago, Mr. Harvey. She's been sober ever since. They're both trying to rebuild their lives. Steve looked at the camera and spoke directly to Marcus's father. Sir, I don't know you. I don't know the details of what you did or why you did it. But I want you to know that your son just stood on national television and defended you, advocated for you, and made it clear that he believes in your redemption. That tells me something about who you became in those 25 years. Because kids don't defend parents who don't deserve it. Your son just showed the world what he's made of, and that reflection speaks to who you must be now. He continued, emotion raw in his voice, and to everyone watching who has written off people with criminal records, who thinks that someone's worst mistake should define them forever, I want you to listen to what Marcus said. At some point, punishment has to end and redemption has to begin. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're just creating a permanent underclass of people who can never escape their past, no matter how much they change. That's not justice. That's just cruelty. Steve wiped his face and tried to regain some composure. All right, we still got a game to finish. Marcus gave his answers. Let's see how he did. He paused. But before we reveal these answers, I want to say something to the producers. Whatever happens with these points, this family is winning. You hear me? This family is winning because what Marcus just did, the courage that took, that's worth more than any prize money. The board revealed the answers one by one. Clothes on the floor for something in a teenager's bedroom. Number 2 answer, 28 points. Traffic for being late to work. Number 1 answer, 42 points. Lift weights for something people do at a gym. Number 1 answer, 35 points. Library for a place where you have to be quiet. Number 2 answer, 31 points. The family already had 136 points from those 4 answers, bringing their total to 283. They had already won. They didn't even need the 5th answer, but everyone in that studio wanted to know if life after prison was on the board. Steve looked at Marcus. Young man, you already won. You see that scoreboard. But I need to know, and I think everyone here needs to know, if your answer is up there. If even one person out of 100 surveyed said what you said. He turned to the board. You said life after prison, for something people deserve a second chance at. Survey said. The board revealed the answer. And there it was. Life after prison. Number 4 answer. With 11 points. The studio exploded. People weren't just clapping, they were on their feet, they were cheering, they were crying. 11 people out of 100 had given the same answer Marcus had. 11 people believed that those who had served their time deserved a real second chance at life. Marcus broke down completely, his grandmother wrapping him in her arms. His cousins surrounded them, all of them crying together. This moment had become about so much more than money or a game show. This was validation. This was proof that they weren't alone in their belief, that other people understood what they had been fighting for. Steve Harvey walked over to the family and joined their embrace. Marcus, he said, those 11 people who gave that answer, they're like you. They have loved ones who are trying to rebuild their lives after prison. They understand what you're fighting for. And now, after this airs, millions more people are going to understand too. He stepped back and addressed the camera again. I want to tell everyone watching something. The Thompson family just won 20,000 and that money is going to help them. But we're going to do more than that. Steve pulled out his phone right there on stage and made a call. Yeah, it's Steve. I need you to set up a meeting with the Steve Harvey Foundation team. We're starting a reentry program for people coming home from prison. Job training, job placement, housing assistance, all of it. Yes, I'm serious. We're doing this. He hung up and looked at Marcus. Your father is going to have a job. My foundation is going to hire him, train him if necessary, and help him get back on his feet. And he's not going to be the only one. We're going to create a program to help other people in his situation. Because you're right, Marcus. People who have done their time and changed their lives deserve a real second chance. The audience went wild, but Steve held up his hand. I'm not done. Marcus, you said you want to be a lawyer so you can fight for people the system has given up on. The Steve Harvey Foundation is going to cover any costs your scholarship doesn't handle. Books, housing, whatever you need, because we need lawyers like you, advocates like you, people who understand the system from the inside and want to change it. Dorothy Thompson was sobbing so hard she could barely stand. Her grandson, the boy she had raised from 6 years old, the boy she had worked 2 jobs to provide for, the boy she had taken to prison every month to see his father, had just changed not only his own family's life, but potentially thousands of other lives as well. Marcus tried to speak but couldn't get words out. Finally, he managed, Mr. Harvey, you don't know what this means. You don't know what you just did for my father, for my family. Yes, I do, Steve said firmly. I know exactly what I did. I helped a young man who had the courage to speak his truth. I supported a family that never gave up on redemption. And I took a step toward fixing a system that's been broken for too long. Steve turned to the Williams family, the family they had been competing against. I want to thank y'all for being here, for being part of this moment. This went beyond competition today. The father of the Williams family spoke up, his voice emotional. Steve, my brother did 10 years. He's been home for 5 years and still can't find decent work. What Marcus said, what you're doing, this matters to us too. Thank you. The revelation that the other family had also been touched by the criminal justice system created another wave of emotion through the studio. This wasn't an isolated issue. This was something that affected millions of families across America, but it was rarely spoken about openly because of the shame and stigma attached to it. After the taping ended, Steve spent another hour with the Thompson family off camera. He wanted to know more about Marcus's father, about his story, about his transformation. Marcus showed him letters his father had written from prison over the years, letters filled with remorse, with love, with determination to be better, with hope for the future. "My father wrote me every single week for 13 years, Marcus explained. Every letter, he would tell me to stay in school, stay away from drugs, make better choices than he did. He would tell me that his biggest regret wasn't even going to prison. It was that his choices stole my childhood from me. He said if his mistakes could at least serve as a lesson for me, then maybe something good could come from all the bad." Steve read some of the letters, and by the time he finished, he understood completely why Marcus had fought so hard for his father's redemption. These weren't the words of a man making excuses. These were the words of a man who had looked at himself honestly, taken responsibility for his actions, and spent years becoming someone his son could be proud of. "I need to meet your father," Steve said. "Can you arrange that?" 2 weeks later, Marcus's father, Michael Thompson, sat across from Steve Harvey in an office at the Steve Harvey Foundation. Michael was 51 years old but looked older, the way prison ages people. His hands were calloused from the work he had done in the prison workshop. His eyes carried the weight of 25 years of regret, but also a glimmer of hope that Marcus's appearance on Family Feud had sparked. "Mr. Harvey," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you for what you're doing for my son, for my family, for me." Steve leaned forward. "Michael, your son stood on national television and advocated for you. He put his family's private pain out there for the world to see because he believes in your redemption. That tells me everything I need to know about who you became in those 25 years. Now, I need to know what you want to do. What are your skills? What's your dream?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Harvey, I learned carpentry in prison. I'm good with my hands. I built furniture, did construction work. But more than that, I want to work with young men who are where I was when I made my mistakes. I want to mentor kids who are growing up in poverty and desperation, kids who think crime is their only option. I want to show them a different path before they end up where I ended up." Steve nodded slowly. "What if I told you we could do both? We can get you working in carpentry, earning a living, getting back on your feet, and we can also get you involved in mentoring programs, speaking to at-risk youth, using your story to prevent other families from going through what yours went through." Michael broke down, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I spent 25 years believing I had destroyed my life completely, that I would never be able to contribute anything positive to the world. You and my son, you're giving me a reason to believe redemption is real." The Steve Harvey Foundation launched the Second Chance Reentry program 6 months later. Michael Thompson was the first person hired, working in the foundation's construction and facilities department while also speaking at schools and community centers about his journey. Within the first year, the program had helped over 100 formerly incarcerated people find employment, housing, and support as they rebuilt their lives. But the impact of Marcus's fast money answer went far beyond one foundation's program. The episode went viral, viewed over 50 million times in the first month alone. It sparked a national conversation about criminal justice reform, about the challenges facing people re-entering society after incarceration, about the need for second chances to be real and not just theoretical. Major companies announced new hiring initiatives for people with criminal records, inspired by the conversation Marcus had started. Politicians referenced the moment in debates about criminal justice reform. Social justice organizations used the clip in their advocacy work. And most importantly, thousands of families who had been dealing with the same issues in silence felt seen and validated. Marcus himself became an unexpected spokesperson for criminal justice reform. He was invited to speak at conferences, to write op-eds, to share his family's story in venues that reached millions of people. He balanced it all with his studies at Howard, maintaining his scholarship while also becoming a voice for the voiceless. In an interview 6 months after the episode aired, Marcus reflected on that moment at the Fast Money podium. "I didn't plan to say what I said. When Mr. Harvey asked what people deserve a second chance at, my father's face just flashed in my mind. I thought about him sleeping on my grandmother's couch, about how hard he's tried to find work, about how much he's changed but how little that seems to matter to society. And I just said what was true for me. I didn't think about how it would sound or whether it was a good game show answer. I just spoke my truth. He continued, "The amazing thing is that it resonated with so many people because it's not just my truth, it's the truth for millions of families. We've created a system where we punish people not just during their sentence, but for the rest of their lives. That's not justice. That's just revenge. And it doesn't make anyone safer. It just creates desperation, which leads to more crime, which creates more victims. It's a cycle that only breaks when we decide that redemption is real and that people who have changed deserve to live like they've changed." 2 years after the Family Feud episode, Marcus was invited back for a special follow-up. The show rarely did follow-ups on individual families, but Marcus's story had been so impactful that they wanted to show viewers what had happened since. The update was remarkable. Michael Thompson was thriving, working full-time in carpentry and mentoring young men through the Second Chance program. He had his own apartment, his own car, and most importantly, a relationship with his son that was growing stronger every day. Marcus's mother had also benefited from the program, getting help with job placement and continuing her recovery journey. Dorothy Thompson, the grandmother who had held the family together through impossible circumstances, was finally able to retire. The prize money from Family Feud, combined with support from the foundation and the community that had rallied around their story, meant she could stop working 2 jobs at age 69. Marcus was thriving at Howard, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while also working with criminal justice reform organizations. He had interned with the Equal Justice Initiative and was already being recruited by top law schools for when he graduated. But the most touching moment of the follow-up came when Steve Harvey brought Michael Thompson onto the stage. This man who had spent 25 years in prison, who had been released to a society that wanted nothing to do with him, stood on the Family Feud stage and thanked his son for never giving up on him. "Marcus," Michael said, his voice breaking, "when you were 6 years old and they took me away in handcuffs, I thought I had destroyed your life. I thought you would grow up hating me, ashamed of me. But you never did. You came to see me every month for 13 years. You wrote me letters. You told me you believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And then you stood on this stage and defended me to the world. You gave me a second chance at being your father. That's a gift I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of." Marcus and his father embraced, and there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Steve Harvey stood to the side, letting them have their moment, but his face showed pure joy. This was why he did what he did. This was the power of platform, the power of storytelling, the power of one person's courage to speak truth. In his closing remarks for the follow-up episode, Steve addressed the camera directly. 2 years ago, a 19-year-old kid stood at that podium and said something that made me fall silent. He said people deserve a second chance at life after prison. And in saying that, he challenged all of us to think about what redemption really means, what justice really requires, what a second chance really looks like. He continued, "Michael Thompson made terrible choices when he was young. He hurt people. He paid for those choices with 25 years of his life. But the question Marcus forced us to ask is this: at what point has someone paid enough? At what point do we let redemption be real instead of just theoretical? Because if we say people can change, but then we never treat them like they've changed, what are we really saying? We're saying that redemption is a lie, that your worst moment defines you forever, that there's no point in trying to be better, because society will never let you be anything but your past." Steve's voice grew passionate. "That's not the world I want to live in. That's not the America I believe in. I believe in second chances. I believe people can change. I believe that Michael Thompson, who mentored younger inmates, who got his education, who did everything right for 13 years, deserves to be treated like the man he became, not the boy he was when he made his mistakes. And I believe there are millions of people just like him who deserve the same opportunity," he concluded. Marcus Thompson's answer made me fall silent because it was the truest answer I've ever heard in Fast Money. People do deserve a second chance at life after prison. They deserve it not because we're being soft on crime, but because we're being smart about redemption. Because every person we successfully reintegrate is one less person returning to crime. Every father we help get back on his feet is a family we keep intact. Every life we help rebuild is a community we make stronger. That's not just compassion, that's common sense. The episode ended with information about the Second Chance Reentry Program and other organizations working to help formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. In the weeks following the broadcast, the program received over $2 million in donations and hundreds of inquiries from people wanting to start similar programs in their own communities. 5 years after that fast money answer, Marcus Thompson graduated from Howard University at the top of his class. He was accepted to Yale Law School with a full scholarship. His father attended his graduation crying tears of pride and joy. Dorothy Thompson, now 72 and healthy, sat between her son Michael and her daughter Regina, watching her grandson receive his degree, knowing that every sacrifice she had made had been worth it. In his graduation speech, Marcus referenced that moment on Family Feud. 5 years ago, I was asked what people deserve a second chance at, and I said life after prison. I said it because I believed it then, and I believe it even more strongly now. But I've learned something in these 5 years. Second chances aren't just for people coming home from prison. Second chances are for all of us. Every time we make a mistake, every time we fail, every time we fall short of who we want to be, we need a second chance. The question is whether we'll give ourselves that chance, and whether we'll extend that same grace to others. He continued, "My father made terrible mistakes. But he's not his mistakes. He's the sum total of every choice he's made, including the choice to change, to grow, to become better. And he's proof that second chances work when we actually give them. He's been home for 5 years. He hasn't reoffended. He's contributed to his community. He's been a father to me. He's everything the system said he could never be, because we gave him a real second chance, not just a theoretical one." Marcus concluded with a challenge. "So I ask you, as you leave here today and go out into the world, who are you going to give a second chance to? Who are you going to see beyond their worst moment? Who are you going to believe in when everyone else has given up? Because that's how we change the world. Not with grand gestures, but with the daily choice to extend grace, to believe in redemption, to give people the second chances we all need and that we all deserve." The speech went viral, just like his fast money answer had 5 years earlier. Marcus Thompson had become exactly what he said he would be: a voice for the voiceless, an advocate for the forgotten, a champion for second chances. 10 years after that afternoon on Family Feud, Marcus was a practicing attorney with the Equal Justice Initiative, defending people who the system had given up on. Michael Thompson was running his own nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people learn skilled trades and find employment. Together, father and son were changing the system that had once tried to destroy their family. And it all started with one answer in the final seconds of Fast Money, an answer so true and so powerful that it made Steve Harvey fall silent and made an audience realize that sometimes the most important things said on television aren't scripted or planned. Sometimes they're just truth, spoken by someone brave enough to share their story, knowing it might change everything. So before you click away from this incredible story, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. These stories matter because they show us that courage looks like a 19-year-old standing on a stage and choosing truth over safety, choosing advocacy over silence, choosing to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. They remind us that second chances aren't just nice ideas, they're necessities if we want a just society. They challenge us to ask ourselves who we've written off, who we've decided is beyond redemption, who we've refused to see as more than their worst moment. Marcus Thompson showed us that one person speaking truth can start a movement, that one family's story can change thousands of lives, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to give up on the people we love, no matter what the world says about them. That's not just a beautiful story. That's a roadmap for how we build a better world, one second chance at a time.